It is time for the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast here at Sportsmemo.com. Alongside Robbie Veno, I am Drew Martin. We're going to be going from 303, 304, all the way down to 329, 330 on your rotation numbers on the odds screen here at Sportsmemo.com. But without further ado, we'll get our college football expert in, Robbie Veno. Welcome to the pod. How are you?
I am good today, Drew. Midweek, lots of work. How about yourself?
Good. We're kind of recording it a little late today. Trying to get as much college football research in as possible. I know you were getting after it, and we're starting off at the top here with a good one in the Sun Belt. We got 303 Georgia State traveling to Jonesboro to take on Arkansas State. Looks like Arkansas State, off that big loss, is still laying 14.5 points here. So you're going to have to lay 2 touchdowns here with Arkansas State versus Georgia State. 57.5 the total, Robbie. How do you view this one? You looking to bet this Sun Belt matchup Thursday night?
You know, it's an interesting game from a fundamental standpoint, Drew, because Arkansas State's rushing yards allowed number is horrible on the season, 245 yards per game allowed. But again, like we always say on this podcast, you have to break these numbers down, and you just can't take overalls at what they're worth. You have to go ahead and see how this occurred. And for the Arkansas State side, 3 games have really cost them in that rushing yards allowed number. They allowed 333 to UNLV 3 weeks ago. Remember now that's when Armani Rogers was at quarterback for UNLV. Certainly a much better rushing team then than they are now with Max Gilliam at the helm. They come back against the triple option of Georgia Southern, and they allow 376 rushing yards. They allow 300. Oh, I got my numbers all screwed up here. 348 rushing yards in that game, and then 246 to App State. So just to go over those last 3 totals in a row, last 3 games, 310, 348, 246 rushing yards allowed by this Arkansas State defense. But I would venture to say, Drew, that UNLV, Georgia Southern, and Appalachian State, all far superior rushing teams to what Georgia State is. Georgia State far more dependent upon the pass. Dan Ellington and Penny Hart, really good combination in that passing game, but they don't run the ball especially well. And I think Arkansas State defensively might be able to reduce those numbers that we see that are so glaring against the run. The other side of the coin is how will they fare offensively. And you and I talked a little bit last week about how Justice Hansen, the quarterback of Arkansas State, does not look like the same player he looked like last year. Again, it may be due to competition a little bit, and this Georgia State defense just has not stopped anybody all season long. Their numbers defensively aren't really skewed. They are what they are, giving up 244 on the ground, 247 through the air, 491 overall. This could be a breakout offensive game for Arkansas State. We've seen a little bit of movement in that total. Open 53, bet up 3.5, 4 points now. So I think perhaps money thinks that Arkansas State is going to break out of their skid here, and we'll see if Georgia State can run it. I mean, if they can run it, Drew, then that's a real bad check mark against the Arkansas State rush defense. But I think that their overall number is more a product of the competition that thrives on the run game. Georgia State doesn't. We'll see if they can throw it a little bit. I would say, if you were going to play this game, I think the money's right in pushing this total up. And we see a little bit of movement on Arkansas State here, a preseason favorite in the Sun Belt, which certainly hasn't turned out to be as good as expected so far.
No, they couldn't hang with App State at all. They got blown out. And I'll tell you, you brought up Justice Hansen, their quarterback. He used to be, either last year or the year before, was the Sun Belt Player of the Year, and this year, you're right, he's just not the same guy. I wonder if he's injured, not really sure what's going on, but he's just not the same player. So I'd like to see him kind of perform well against Sun Belt competition before looking to bet on him. Obviously, the market not having the same view that I am, pushing it from 13 up to 14.5 they're having to lay. So this will be an interesting one that definitely be watching, maybe be involved in from a total standpoint. But we got 305, 306 Stanford at Arizona State in the Pac-12. So we got a good kind of back-to-back games here on Thursday night, one in the Sun Belt and then one in the Pac-12, the nightcap here. Looks like Stanford, the Cardinal, laying 2.5 on the highway at Arizona State here. 57 the total, Robbie. How would you look to bet this one?
Obviously the line reacts drastically to Bryce Love and his status health-wise. Drew, it's been that way for, I think this will be the third consecutive game for Stanford where Bryce Love's health has been in question. But let's just look real close at what they've done on the ground in their last 3 games. They've got 3 consecutive games now where they rushed for less than 75 yards. That's very un-Stanford-like. The Oregon game, which they stole from Oregon with a late rally, and then they win in overtime, but they rushed the ball 24 times for 71 yards, just 3 per carry. Come back the following week against Notre Dame, 24 rushes, 55 yards, 2.3 per carry. And, of course, last week completely stymied by Utah's defense, 28 carries, 42 rushing yards, 1.5 per. Those totals do not reflect sack yardage, which counts against your rushing numbers in college football, but they are indicative of how tough it's been for Stanford to run on their last 3 opponents, and those are very, very good opponents. Oregon, Notre Dame, and Utah. And certainly the status of Bryce Love has hurt them in some of those games, but they're having a tough time running it right now. Arizona State's not necessarily a rock against the run. There have been teams this year that have come in and run it right down their throat. The Michigan State game way back when, Michigan State you would have thought could have done it to them, but they didn't. It was the following week against San Diego State where they put up 311 rushing yards. How about Oregon State put up 261 against this ASU defense? And I think if you take a look real quick at the Arizona State defense, it's starting to collapse a little bit, Drew. 494 yards in their last game before the bye against Colorado, total yardage allowed, and 406 against Oregon State. So there's a little bit of chink in that Arizona State armor right now, and I wonder how the bye week affects that. Herm Edwards, a defensive-minded guy, can probably make some adjustments here, and if you can just bottle up Stanford, which teams have tended to do so far this season, they throw 8 in the box, dare you to run. They put it on Costello's arm and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside catching the football. That's the way Stanford's going to have to do it this week, I think. And an interesting number here as far as quarterback pressure is concerned, Stanford allowed 9 sacks in their last 2 games heading into this one. But how about Arizona State? They got 9 sacks in their opening start against Texas San Antonio. And since that day, 5 games later, they've only gotten 9 sacks. So 9 opening day, 9 total the next 5 weeks. Not a lot of pressure brought by Arizona State. This could get into a quarterback versus quarterback, star wide receiver versus star wide receiver type of shootout. We're talking here, of course, about KJ Costello and Manny Wilkins at the quarterback spot, and JJ Arcega-Whiteside and N'Keal Harry for Arizona State on the wide receiver side. And to me, this game does develop somewhat into a passing shootout. I know Herm Edwards entered the year wanting to be a pro-style run-first type of team, but their team has not run the football exceptionally well in a lot of cases this year, Drew. They've had to go to the air. So we'll see how this one goes. Both teams have had a chance to prep for it. Extra time is always good in these situations. We'll see which one comes out of here in this non-divisional Pac-12 contest. I don't know that they'll be more focused, but better prepared to kind of improve on their weaknesses. I really wonder about this Stanford running game, to tell you the truth. I think I would look toward over here because I think Stanford's going to have to make their way through the air. That being said, anybody who's watched Stanford this year knows that head coach David Shaw, even when they can't run, doesn't really come off of the run. I mean, they continue to run even though they can't. And it'll be interesting to see if Bryce Love plays, because right now Coach Shaw is hopeful that he can go in this Thursday night start. We'll wait another day and check his status.
Guys, I also want to let you know we're going to do something a little new on the podcast as far as coupon codes. We're going to do full season coupon code for half off of Rob Veno's college football. It's almost $500 in savings. So if you just type in Veno, Veno, half, HALF, at checkout, you'll get half off his full season college football. That's $4.49 it will cost you. We'll get you all the way through the national championship game. No extra charges later for bowls or anything like that. It's coupon code VENO1/2 for the rest of college football season with Robbie Veno. Also a special shout out on Twitter, trying to try something new with these podcasts. Seem to be getting good feedback, to Jason Thompson and John Williams responding on Twitter to ask Rob and myself some questions on college football handicapping. So when we get through all the games here on today's podcast, which we got 7 or 8 more, we will answer those 2 questions coming up at the end. But let's move on to Friday's card here, Robbie. We got 307, 308, Colorado State, Boise State in the Mountain West. 62 the total I'm seeing at Bookmaker, with Boise laying 23.5 on the blue turf. How would you look to bet this one?
Boy, they haven't been good as a favorite on the blue turf either, Drew. In recent memory, I think I had a number this morning of 2-13 their last 15 against the spread as a favorite at home. So Boise State been burning your money if you're betting them as a home favorite here. Obviously, they're the better team. But, Boise's faltered somewhat off of what we saw early on this season. That Oklahoma State game really, from what we see now, from what we've learned now, seems to have done them in a little bit as far as perception is concerned, and probably as far as their overall talent is concerned. Colorado State never got out of the blocks to start the season, and if we just take a look at what they've done, they've had 3 games where they scored 34 points, and 42 points. Those 3 games for Colorado State came against Hawaii, Arkansas, and San Jose State, the number 94, 101, and 114th ranked defenses across the country. If they're not playing a team ranked 94th or worse defensively, they can't score. 13 points against Colorado, 10 points against Florida, 19 points against FCS Illinois State, and then 20 last week against New Mexico, who ranks as one of the worst defenses in the country. KJ Carter-Samuels has not been the answer here for this team. The offensive line's been poor. The running game hasn't gotten going. I know Izzy Matthews has had a tough time running the football for this team. They've got all sorts of offensive problems, and that compounds things because it makes it tough around the defense. You would think Brett Rippon and company could have a big day here offensively. I don't know why they can't, but they do somehow. Even last week we saw, again, they tend to stagnate during games. I don't know what to make of them on that side of the football, but I know this. They're good enough defensively to keep Colorado State from going crazy in this game. I don't want to lay 23.5, though, because the Boise State point spreads have been so inflated as a home favorite that you probably wind up on the wrong end of that. Tough game for me to call either way, Drew. I know there's been a huge push on this total. Still looking at that. But like I say, Colorado State against good defenses and not even against good defenses, because last week they couldn't move it against New Mexico. Colorado State against average to subpar to terrible defenses hasn't really moved it great all season long. So we'll see what they do here in this contest against Boise State.
And Robbie, I just said the 2 questions we'll answer at the end, but actually we'll be able to answer one of them in the next game, because John Williams on Twitter asked, talk about the line movement in the Air Force game. Next game up, we got 309, 310, Air Force at UNLV, Sam Boyd Stadium here, late on Friday night, the nightcap here. We got Air Force minus 11, with the total being 57. I think he's talking about it open 13. It was sitting at 12. Now we're seeing 11s across the board. But Robbie, let's hear the breakdown. Plus, if you could add in any thoughts on this line movement.
Well, I would start immediately with my guess would be that guys out there betting this game who keep their own numbers probably see a lot of value in the UNLV side. Now, take into account UNLV's been downgraded with the loss of Armani Rogers at quarterback and Max Gilliam taking over, because Gilliam just doesn't present the running threat that Rogers does. But so far, quarterback rating, Gilliam's been better. And not great, only completing 47.2% of his passes, but his quarterback rating as a thrower has been better than what Rogers is. Power ratings that I keep, Drew, show Air Force only a 6-point favorite, which is why I said off the top that I think guys who keep numbers just see value here. Thought 13 was too big. chop it down a little just based on their numbers, not necessarily based on what we've seen with our eyes the last couple of weeks, which has been, of course, UNLV without their starting quarterback, and Air Force just interchanging quarterbacks. It seems like an Air Force quarterback gets injured every game, a new one comes in. All three guys basically the same quarterback here. They don't suffer with any of the three in. Donald Hammond III got hurt last game. Bring back Isaiah Sanders. Doesn't really make a difference. They're like the same quarterback. And if either one of those or if both of those are gone, Arian Wortham comes in, and he's maybe not the thrower the other two are, but certainly very capable of moving that Air Force offense through the air at times, and certainly with his legs. So Air Force playing real good right now, playing good defense. I was surprised to see that in the blowout by Utah State last week that UNLV was able to accumulate over 400 yards. Now, Air Force's defense has been really good, rock solid the last few weeks. But UNLV as the quarterback, Gilliam gets more used to playing, and as that unit becomes a little bit more cohesive, they're going to get better. And I don't know that Air Force, the way they play the game, they're trying to grind clock and run the football. I don't know that 13 was a real good number right off the bat. Probably should have been a little lower. I think it was, in my estimation, padded pretty heavily based upon the absence of Rutgers. I don't know if I agree with it, Drew. I kind of agree with the guys who have taken it down from 13 to 11. Like I say, Power Ratings made this game 6. To answer the question, concisely, I really think that this bet on Air Force, or the money that's come in on Air Force, is strictly due to guys seeing value in that number. Double-digit number just looks too big.
Okay. That was a good breakdown, Robbie. I think as far as the line movement goes, some of it I believe has to do with Lexington Thomas got upgraded to probable. He's questionable before. Obviously, Armani Rogers out for UNLV as well. So to add that to what you said, plus, we got to also remember going from 12 to 11. Those are dead numbers on a single night Friday night game, or on a Friday night game. So some of these weekday line movements, I don't think every line movement is created equal. As far as there tends to be a little bit more volatility in the weeknight games because there's more tickets written. So if somebody has an opinion on it, and it can just kind of run. And I think that that's part of it as well. But, Robbie, the 2 straight losses, both straight up and ATS for UNLV against New Mexico and Utah State, don't really scare you. Plus, just 2 weeks ago they went against, obviously not the same type of option attack, but option principle offense in New Mexico and gave up 50 points. So you think this UNLV defense can turn it around against the military academy here?
Yeah, I don't know that they'll turn it around, Drew, because I don't think that side of the football can get any better. They brought in a new defensive coordinator this year, Tim Skipper, who had a kind of a grassroots project to try and get this team back to being able to create some type of havoc, being able to rush the passer. In his words, to start the season, he had to change the whole mindset of what he said he had to create a winning mentality. If you wanted to take the exact opposite of that, you would say that defense had kind of a losing mentality heading in. So there's a lot of work to do on the defensive side. But I think with Gilliam, the fact that and again, the Utah State game was a blowout last week, and a lot of yardage can be picked up in garbage time when you're down by 5 touchdowns. But the fact that Gilliam and UNLV were able to get over 400 against Utah State and throw the ball fairly effectively seems to me that maybe the offense is the part that can get a little bit better for UNLV. I don't think the defense is going to get any better. Air Force has not been tremendous on the offensive side of the football so far this season. So maybe having looked at it once, they can kind of contain Air Force a little bit, but I wouldn't be betting on UNLV because I think their defense is going to stop people. If I were to play the game, I would say, in my opinion, it would be based on value, and it would be based on the fact that I think that maybe Gilliam could come in the back door. Their receivers are still pretty good at UNLV.
All right, Robbie, that's the Thursday and Friday slate there. 2 on Thursday, 2 on Friday. Now we're going to move to the Saturday card. We got 3-11, 3-12 heading to the SEC, 7:30 Eastern kick. Vanderbilt at Kentucky, 48.5. The total looks like the Wildcats laying 11.5 in Lexington.
Yeah, and you want to talk about defenses that are disintegrating. How about this Vanderbilt defense, Drew? Now, the last 4 games they've played are their only 3 SEC contests, and in between there's a game against an FCS opponent, Tennessee State. But let's just take those 3 SEC contests that Vandy's played in the last 4 weeks. How about allowing 534 total yards to South Carolina, 560 yards to Georgia, and follow that up with 576 to Florida last week. Grand total, 1,670 yards allowed in SEC play, 556.7 per contest. It doesn't matter if you want to run the football or throw it on Vanderbilt right now. 261.3 on the ground, 295.3 through the air. They can't stop anything as far as SEC competition is concerned. And Kentucky's had a week off to stew over that Texas A&M overtime loss where, Benny Snell and company went from undefeated to having 1 loss. They're going to come out pretty fired up here. And that ground attack, I mentioned it to you on this podcast before. The one thing that I take away from watching Kentucky this year is the physicality on both sides of the football. What Mark Stoops and that coaching staff has developed there on the offensive side in the trenches, on the defensive side in the front 7, and even in the defensive backfield really looks different and matches up physically in SEC play and has so far this season. The defensive discrepancy between these 2 teams to me is like night and day. And I don't know that Vanderbilt's going to have any success stopping Kentucky from running the football, and therefore they probably won't be able to stop play action when Kentucky wants to go to it as well. You have to factor in the quarterback run game for Kentucky. This could be a ton of trouble for Vandy, which comes off a game last week, to make matters worse for them, where they had Florida by 18 points and collapsed in the second half and got blown out in the second half, leading to that 10-point loss. I don't know that their mindset is very good right now. Derek Mason, known as a defensive coach, he's got big issues there. Kyle Shermer, I don't think, can match Kentucky point-wise here, and I don't know that they'll have a lot of success against the Kentucky defense. That's a defense that to this point in the season, Drew, I believe has allowed 83 total points in 6 games. Pretty good stuff out of the Wildcats so far, and I don't see any reason why it would change here against Vandy.
We got 313, 314 Cincinnati at Temple, 48.5 the total. Looks like Temple -3, some 3.5s out there, so this is an important one to shop around. That's what they're laying at home. Robbie, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, it's Armstead, obviously. It looks like he's probable now for Temple, their star running back. It looks like he'll go, so that will probably attract some Temple money here. There's a real difference, Drew, in strength of schedule between these 2 teams. Power ratings that I keep show Cincinnati's opposition power rating is on average 10 points less than what Temple has played so far this season. So while Cincinnati's been a point spread darling, and in fact I went to Twitter and posted a number earlier today, if you just blindly bet Cincinnati every week of the season to win the game, to win the first half, and to win the second half, you're 5-1, 5-1, and 6-0, 16-2 overall, 89% just cashing tickets left and right with Cincy. But a lot of it could be due to the lack of competition so far that they've played. They really haven't proven much. Temple, to me, will be the top opponent for them, especially in conference so far this season. Jeff Collins has turned it around at Temple. They've become a little bit more of a diverse offense. They can throw it downfield. When they do throw it, they attack vertically and they run it real well, especially if Armstead plays. If he doesn't play, I would take that statement back. They don't run it real well without him, but it looks like he's going to go here. So this is a big game, divisional matchup between these two because they both sit in the east side, and it's difficult to make a play right now for me on this game just based on the schedule strength of these two. Not so sure how real Cincinnati is. I've seen Temple put together some real good efforts thus far this season. I know you and I have talked about the fact that Luke Fickell has recruited the heck out of the last couple of years, and Cincinnati's got talent, and maybe better young talent than anybody else in the conference, and that may be what's shining through here. They're like plus 140 points or something crazy, points for and points against so far this year. So they've really done the job, but I'm worried about that strength of schedule. And let's see how they take on the road against a team that's better on average, a lot better on average than the opposition they faced so far this season.
Robbie, what was that stat you said with betting Cincinnati?
Yeah, if you just bet Cincinnati blind against the spread, now point spread wise, bet them for the game, bet them for the first half, bet them for the second half, you've gone 5-1 in games, 5-1 in first halves, and 6-0 in second half. So 16-2 overall, 89% winners just mechanically going and playing Cincinnati every week, 3 different ways so far this season.
On the money line.
And if you bet them on the money line, I mean, they've covered the spread, so if you bet them on the money, you didn't even have to bet them on the money line because this is all point spread numbers.
Okay, so that's it's just proprietary stats there, Robbie. I like it. Also, real quick, is the AAC East the most underrated division in college football, in your opinion?
Now, I cheated and saw on Twitter that you like it, so maybe I should let you talk about it. Hey, they've been good, but I would give you front and center on that one. You like it. Tell us why.
They have 3 undefeated teams, Robbie, and they have UCF, the longest winning streak out of any program in the country. I just threw it out there. In my opinion, it's very underrated. I guess it's, when you say underrated, it's just an opinion, but I'm interested to see if you agree with me.
No, and they've come around, Drew. There's better coaches in that conference now. Obviously, we've had a few years for Central Florida and South Florida to accumulate talent. I think everybody knew that those 2 schools especially would be able to draw talent to their universities because the state of Florida is just so overloaded with football talent. The fact that, like we just said, Luke Fickell has recruited real well at Cincinnati brings them back into the fold. I think in time you'll see SMU get better. Houston right now, with Major Applewhite at the helm, and certainly with Kendall Briles running that air raid system, that attracts a lot of offensive talent. So, there's a lot of teams there with a lot of potential to get even better as we go along. And I think as time's gone by, I'd agree with you that this conference overall and that division in particular has gotten better. We'll see if guys like Randy Edsall, who's going from the ground up at UConn, can make strides as well in the coming years. If teams like that get better, then that East really is going to be quite the tussle for first place, because I don't see Central Florida or South Florida or Cincinnati, those 3 teams, I don't see them going anywhere but up over the course of the next few years.
All right, guys, we're about halfway through on this podcast. We promise we'll go a little quicker. I think we're going to go over time if we don't. But we got 315, 316, UCF at ECU. Stay in the AAC here. We got the Knights laying 20.5, and East Carolina. We got 65.5 as the total here. Robbie, would you lay this big number with UCF?
I think I'd have to. In my mind, Drew, after watching East Carolina maybe 3-4 times this season, they probably pick up the most meaningless yardage of any team in college football. And I know that's a very subjective statement. Just like you said before on the AAC East, it's an opinion, in my opinion, watching them. Because you look at their offensive totals and you say, wow, they're a pretty good offensive team. Then you watch them play and you see them move the football up and down. And you see them score no points. Plenty of their drives come up empty. And Central Florida here, off of that close shave with Memphis, it's a team that generally gets out of the chute real quick, opening kickoff, boom, score on first drives, get ahead big early. I think they can do that against East Carolina here. So East Carolina playing catch-up football doesn't thrill me because, like I say, they do pass it around a little bit, but they just don't score points. And if you're going to play Central Florida, you have to score points. I don't know that 20.5 is that big of a number. UCF makes this number look small a lot of times and probably could make it look small here again. There's no real home field advantage to worry about at ECU either. And head coach Scotty Montgomery, from what we're reading now, really on the hot seat. This team's got some troubles, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough to make money betting against UCF just because when they got a team down, they're going to run up the score if they can. So, 21, it wouldn't worry me as much as, like, other games as far as, like, 7.5, whatever. Like, 20.5, 21 doesn't worry me as much with UCF. But, however, having said that, it's a tough spot for UCF. You know, they just came off of that tough-fought game against Memphis, having to come back. There was weather issues, so they're going back on the road now, so back-to-back conference road games. This is a tough one. I'm probably not going to be involved, but this next one is interesting. We got UNC at Syracuse, 66.5 the total, with Syracuse laying 8.5 at home. I would say this, Robbie, North Carolina is coming on of late, and they outgained Virginia Tech, even though they lost the game. I think UNC might be a bet on. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, they really – I thought I was being proactive last week with them, Drew, and they really disappointed me in the end because they left so many points on the field. I had that game over as the 5% or 20-star play last week, over 57 points. And to tell you the truth, North Carolina – without exaggerating, probably left 17 on the field for those who watched the game. I mean, again, Nathan Elliott, it's kind of irritating to watch this guy miss open receivers, then come back and throw a laser, and then miss touchdown passes and fumble, running backs fumbling in the end zone, all kinds of things that went wrong in those 522 total yards for UNC last week. Like I say, I thought I was being proactive. I thought coming out of the bye, the offense would perform well against what's a tattered Virginia Tech secondary. And for the most part, they did move it up and down the field. But that, game landed 41 because UNC only had 19 out of the potential, Drew, could have been in the 40s for folks who watched that game. So if they can play spotless football, and when they have, Larry Fedora draws up some great plays with guys running wide open, and they just don't connect. Those plays start connecting, and they're going to start being the scoring team that we know UNC to be during Fedora's tenure. Against Syracuse, I know Syracuse's secondary is in a lot better shape than Virginia Tech's is, so maybe the passing yardage doesn't come as easy. When Fortin got hurt, the starting quarterback for North Carolina last week, and had to bring Elliott in, that was kind of a downer because Fortin was really moving the team a lot better. His status up in the air this week. We'll see how that goes. I like what you said because I'm in the same boat with you. I think North Carolina is a team that could come on the second half, but it's a play that it's a team, that is just this shy of full execution on offense and scoring a lot more points than what they've been putting on the board.
Yeah, so Robbie, because I was interested in that Fortin thing. You watched the game.
Yeah.
How is his injury?
At the time, when he went out, you could tell he wasn't coming back for the rest of the game. Now, reports that I read this week have a questionable tag next to his name. I didn't think it was going to be. I thought it would have been more towards the doubtful side, but now I see questionable. So I'm just trying to read up on it as each day goes by, and we'll see. It looks like there's a possibility he could go, Drew. It was a lower ankle leg injury, and kind of going out of bounds, too, on that play where he got hurt. So we'll see. He was running the football as well as throwing the football last week, and they didn't expect him to be that much of a runner, but he was, and he's an improvement, believe me, at quarterback for this team over Nathan Elliott. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. We got 319, 320 in the Big Ten. Maryland at Iowa, 47.5 the total. Looks like Iowa. Big line movement here. They're bet down to as low as 8.5. You got any interest in betting Maryland, Iowa here, Robbie?
I don't know, because I'm of the opinion, and we went through this a couple of weeks ago, right? Maryland played Michigan, and in the analysis I was saying to you that watching Maryland, I know one thing: if they can't run the football, they can't beat you because their passing game is non-existent. And in that Michigan game, even though they got to 21 points, and I think 14 of them were late, but Michigan got over 40. I believe they covered that number that day, and Michigan's defense against the run was the main reason why. Iowa's defense against the run is extremely good as well, and Nate Stanley right now is throwing the football as well as anybody. All of a sudden, Iowa has become a team, Drew, that you could almost depend on to go ahead and play over with because they're scoring points that they hadn't really scored before. And Stanley's the reason. The passing game has obviously clicked for this team. They put up 42 more last week against Indiana. Maryland's a talented football team, but I just don't like them when they're facing a real good run defense. And when you look at Iowa's numbers on the season, they're allowing 81.5 yards per game on the ground. I don't know that Maryland cracks that number against this team, and I just don't like to be holding a ticket with them depending upon their passing game to get me points or to get me offensive production. Not sure that I agree with the line move, but I guess somebody out there sees something that I don't, because right now I wouldn't be going against the Iowa Hawkeyes. They seem to have both sides of the ball clicking on all cylinders, and their special teams have even been pretty good as well.
Robbie, let's go to the ACC here. Two really smart schools. Virginia at Duke. We got 45 the total. Looks like Duke laying 7.5 or 7. Good one to shop around. Make sure you're getting the best of the number with this one, because you can get 7.5 or 7. Virginia off of their biggest win since what? The 2010-2011 season, Robbie? You think that they can follow it up here against a well-coached Duke team?
You have to give head coach Bronco Mendenhall and offensive coordinator Robert Anae a lot of credit for the turnaround in this team. Of course, Bryce Perkins at quarterback has helped, but they've been there now. I think Mendenhall's been there 3 seasons, and this is the 3rd time they've changed the offensive scheme. This year they went more to a zone read option style of offense, because that's Perkins is a dual threat quarterback. And it's worked. And it's really good because Robert Anae is well-versed in all forms of spread. This is more like a Rich Rodriguez spread, who I coached with when he was at Arizona. And he's also well-versed in the air raid system that Virginia tried when Mendenhall first got to Charlottesville. So this year it's worked for them offensively. Defensively, they've been good too. Duke put together a great defensive effort last week. No surprise there, because it's a great defensive team against Georgia Tech's triple option, shut them down. To me, this looks like a battle where my first inclination was to look at the under in this game, Drew. I think that Daniel Jones and the offense of Duke could have some trouble moving the football on Virginia, and vice versa. I don't know that Virginia is going to move it comfortably against the Duke defense as well. The number, though, at 45.5 in college football, nowadays, it's so hard to play games under 45.5. But that's still the way I would look, and I'd probably look to take points here. I think Virginia can hang in. It's a big win for Duke last week. And certainly Virginia, like I say, they're coming on right now on both sides of the football. I give Anae and Mendenhall a lot of credit for this offensive switch and the fact that it's kind of worked out for them.
Robbie, heading to Conference USA, we got the FAU Owls traveling to Huntington, West Virginia to take on Marshall here. FAU bet up from a pick 'em at the Open to 3 pretty much across the board now as road favorites. 64 the total. FAU is off of a bye. Do you look to bet on FAU and Lane Kiffin off the bye, or you think Marshall is a good home dog here?
Yeah, Marshall's now. They cashed for me last week because they played ODU, and I had that game over the total. And boy, there was a lot of late scoring in that game, Drew. Marshall finally was able to basically just hand the football off in the last 6 minutes and get touchdowns. I mean, you're looking at 65 and 46-yard TD runs in the last 3 minutes of that game by Marshall, because Old Dominion had just worn down. But they're a difficult offense to watch without Isaiah Green at the helm here. Thompson's doing as good as he can, but I don't think that's good enough against Florida Atlantic. It's interesting to me, Drew, the 2 weeks prior to the bye with FAU, we saw these huge movements on the total pushed down towards the under. One was a successful line move. The other was a non-successful line move. The last game Florida Atlantic played went way over the total. The quarterback play has been a little bit suspect for FAU this season, and I think that's the reason why some of their offensive production had been down, but they looked real good in their last contest. And I don't know that Marshall, as good of a Conference USA defense as they are, I don't know that they're capable of holding Florida Atlantic. Like you say, Florida Atlantic had to bye to get a few more things together. Devin Singletary seeing some things open up a little bit right now. Teams focus on him, but FAU, if they can throw the football and loosen stuff up for him, they're a really good football team. I'm still interested in the status of Isaiah Green here, the quarterback for Marshall, because if he's able to come back, things could get a little bit better for them. Don't really want Thompson. Tough game for me to play the Marshall side because I don't like them as far as an offense is concerned. And I'd probably be a little bit interested in the total here. There's some scattered rain, and folks listening here, just check all the eastern cities, check the Midwestern cities, because there's chance of rain in a lot of these places. Marshall could be one of them. I don't know that it'll affect the game, but I might look towards FAU over because I think that offense is going to start to roll the way it did last year.
We got 325, 326, a 9 a.m. Pacific kick. Northwestern at Rutgers. Looks like Northwestern laying 20 on the highway, 48.5 the total.
Can't possibly play Rutgers. I should probably just end any analysis right there. It's a team that, a lot of hope coming into the season that there'd be some improvement and more competitiveness under Chris Ash. But there's been so many injuries, Drew, to a team that has no depth to begin with, that they're just out there like a shell. And Northwestern comes off a game last week where they got scared but still won. And I don't know that head coach Pat Fitzgerald is going to let them get into that scared category again this week. I think much like we talked earlier about Central Florida, East Carolina, I think here's a spot where Northwestern can get ahead early, big, and their defense can do the rest from there. They haven't necessarily missed star running back Jeremy Larkin all that much since he retired from football. I thought it was going to be a bigger deal than it's turned out to be through a couple of weeks here. It certainly won't be a big deal against Rutgers because you could have a fourth-team running back running well against Rutgers. You hate to lay this much with Northwestern, but Rutgers just plays themselves into such huge deficits early that and they're unable to fight back because they're turnover prone once they're coming from behind, especially through the air. So I think for me it would be Northwestern or nothing else.
Robbie, heading to with Sunbelt Independent matchup here. We got 327, 328 Coastal Carolina at UMass, 71 the total. UMass laying 3 at home. They are off of a bye. This is an interesting matchup. What do you got on the Chanticleers versus the Minutemen?
Well, if they get quarterback Kilton Anderson back for this one, we may see, 850, 900 yards through the air between these two quarterbacks, Anderson and Andrew Ford for UMass. We know what UMass does. They wing it around under Mark Whipple, and they're successful against almost any defense. I mean, obviously they're not going to go ahead and score 35 against the extreme top-tier defenses of the college football world, but anybody else, you can count on them to score, and you can count on them to give it right back because defensively they are extremely poor. But I think the key here for Coastal Carolina really relies on Kilton Anderson coming back, and all indications are that he will be back for this contest. That's why we see a total of 73.5. Massachusetts has made these numbers look small all season long. You get a little gun shy, Drew, playing overs when they get into the low 70s or even above. But Massachusetts is one team that really doesn't seem to mind that. I mean, you can't push them high enough for these guys because they're so giving on both sides of the football. They get you the points, and they get them quickly, and they give them up just as quickly. Their last 2 games against Ohio U and South Florida both totaled 100. Identical scores, 58-42, 100 points in each game, 80 and 87 the 2 games before that against FIU and Charlotte. Betting them under at your own risk. I think in this case you would just play over or don't play at all. Massachusetts is totally focused on trying to find their way to a bowl game this year. And right now, if they don't win out, I don't think they get there. You have to get to 6 wins. So they're going to have to win 4 more football games here. And Coastal Carolina is a winnable contest. We'll see how it goes. Wouldn't want to bet either side, but I think you'll see a lot of passing yardage and a lot of points.
And guys, we got one more game left. Remember Robbie Veno's coupon code for half off the rest of his full season college football is Veno, his last name, VENOHALF. That's Veno half for half off his full season. college football. On his top plays in the new system here at Sportsmemo is 4% and 5%. That is the old 15-star and 20-star. We're changing it to percent here. He's gone 21, 12, and 1, 64% on the year, and overall he's up almost 10 units on the season. So good stuff from Robbie Veno. We got one game left, and then we'll answer a question from Twitter. And feel free, guys, for throughout any podcast, whenever we're tweeting from the Sports Memo account, feel free to reply with any questions you have for any of the handicappers or myself going forward. We got 329, 330 to end it today, Robbie. Then we'll be back tomorrow to start it up with Michigan State, and finish out the card. But we got Miami of Ohio traveling to play Army. 48 the total, with Army laying 7 in the hook at home.
I think you've got to respect what Miami what Chuck Martin's team has been able to do offensively the last 4 weeks. How about Miami of Ohio behind the arm of Gus Ragland, putting up 38, 39, 41, and 31 points after really not doing much to start the season. So the offense is clicking. They can move it through the air. They've actually become pretty balanced. The run game's gone well for them too. But the bigger problem here, Drew, is can they stop this option offense of Army? Army, this year, what makes them different from the past couple of years where they've shown improvement is the fact that their defense has been really good. I mean, let's not forget that this team went to Norman, Oklahoma, and held Oklahoma to 28 points with overtime. That's the most they've given up all season long. They faced Liberty's passing offense, gave up 14. They faced Hawaii's run and shoot, gave up 21. Oklahoma, as I just mentioned, only gave up 28. They played Buffalo and Tyree Jackson and company, another prolific passing offense, and only gave up 13 points. I just don't know how Gus Ragland is any better with his offensive weaponry than those 4 teams I just rattled off. And for Miami, of course, I think I read a quick note somewhere that they haven't played an option team since 2011. This is a difficult task for Miami of Ohio. Give them credit for what they've done on the offensive side of the football as of late. But I think Army right now, they're so disciplined and so focused, and they're so much better on the defensive side, especially against the pass. I don't think Miami is the right side here. I would play Army or not at all.
Okay, good stuff, Robbie. And let's answer this question from Jason Thompson. Shout out to him, as well as John Williams, who we talked about Air Force earlier. But Jason asks, Utah's offensive resurrection, and should we anticipate it continuing?
Yeah, and first let me just say, Jason, one of my favorite guys, been dealing with me for the past few years now. Kind of a totals guy like myself. So thanks for the question, Jason. I would say the answer in simple form to that is probably yes. The quarterback play out of Huntley to start the season was a disaster, and it looked nothing like the quarterback play of last year that this kid provided the Utah Utes. But the last couple of weeks, it's all come back together. I think Britton Covey, one of the most underrated offensive weapons in the country right now, we see him added to that Utah offense and the spark that he brings. They can run it. They can throw it. Remember, when we started this season, I probably did a preview with Andrew Lang, Drew, or maybe I had a podcast with you. I can't remember. But Kyle Whittingham said to start the season, when my team comes off the bus, they look like a Pac-12 champion coming off the bus. He hasn't had this kind of depth. He hasn't had this kind of size and speed. It's all being put together right now, and they might be the class of that side of the conference right now. So, to Jason's question, yes, I think that offensive production is going to continue. I don't see a lot of defenses across the Pac-12 that can stop them right now.
Yeah, I agree with you, and it's going to come down. Well, likely will come down to this game against USC this weekend. But they have had a resurrection, no doubt. I mean, he struggled early on, though. I lost some money betting on Utah.
Yeah.
Early, even though their defense was solid, they just couldn't move the ball for whatever reason. But he has come on of late, so it would be interesting. He's got to run the ball more, though. He's a different guy when he uses his legs. He also asks a question here. What to expect from the UNC offense moving forward. We touched on the UNC game. I think we're both pretty high on them, especially if the quarterback's playing. But you want to follow up with the UNC offense going forward, Robbie?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, I'm in the same boat as you, Drew. I really tried to be proactive with that team last week, thinking that they were going to come out of that bye and score a lot of points. And the offensive yardage production did not disappoint. It's the failure to execute, like I said earlier, Jason, that this team, if they can execute the plays that Larry Fedora is drawing up and they don't miss, you just can't miss on these home run type plays, Drew, and you can't drive to the opponent's 1 yard line and then, line plunge and fumble into the end zone. That type of stuff has to go. I think they're going to be better. Fedora seems to have all the kids' heads in it still, and that's a big thing. Remember all the suspensions they went through? Everybody's back now, and it looks like the team is playing with some sense of pride. So hopefully that, game last week, it was a tough loss. Hopefully it doesn't get in their heads. I think they could be better. I'm just a little gun-shy after what I saw last week.
Great stuff, Robbie, on the pod. Remember his coupon code for half off a full season is Veno half. And guys, we'll be back tomorrow with the rest of the college football Every Game on the Board podcast.